I was asleep in the back seat of my pickup when someone tapped on the glass. It wasn't loud. Just two steady knocks, calm, patient. I opened my eyes and saw a flashlight beam cut across the inside of the cab. For a second I didn't know where I was. Then I remembered. The grocery store parking lot off Highway 89. Cold night, early March. I'd parked under one of the taller lights, so it felt a little safer. When you're sleeping in your truck at 50, the days start blending together. I rolled down the window halfway. The air outside was sharp and dry. Northern Arizona cold has a way of settling into your joints. License and registration, the officer said. He looked young, maybe mid-30s. Clean uniform, careful eyes, not aggressive, just doing his job. I handed him my wallet and the registration envelope I kept in the glove box. My fingers felt stiff. I hadn't slept well. The metal frame under the seat cushion never really lets you forget it's there. I figured it was another warning about overnight parking, or a citation. I'd gotten 3 that month already, maybe 4. Hard to keep track when you're choosing between paying tickets and buying gas. He walked back to his cruiser. I watched him in the side mirror, typing, pausing, leaning closer to the screen. Then he sat up straighter. Even from across the lot I could see the shift. He spoke into his radio. His posture changed, slower movements, more deliberate. When he walked back, his hand rested near his belt. "Mr. Walker," he said, and his voice was different now, controlled, careful. "I need you to step out of the vehicle slowly." My heart started beating harder, but I kept my voice even. "Is there a problem, officer? Please step out." I opened the door and stood up. The cold asphalt felt steady under my boots. He angled the flashlight lower, not in my face, at my chest, watching my hands. "There's a federal notice attached to your record," he said, "flagged from 1988. I was 18 in 1988. I blinked at him. "That has to be a mistake." He turned his laptop screen toward me inside the cruiser. Red text. "Federal notification required. Department of Homeland Security." My breath fogged the glass as I leaned closer. "They're requesting your exact location," he said quietly. "Someone's on the way." I stood there in a faded jacket, unshaven, sleeping in my truck. And somewhere in the federal system, my name had been waiting for 36 years. The date on the file pulled something loose in my memory. August 18th, 1988. The week my Uncle Daniel died. I hadn't thought about him in years. As the wind moved across the empty parking lot, I sat down on the curb like the officer asked. Then I waited. The officer stayed a few steps away from me, not looming, just close enough that I knew he was taking it seriously. He kept looking between me and the entrance to the lot. Every so often he glanced at his cruiser screen like he was hoping the red alert would disappear if he blinked long enough. I sat on the curb with my hands resting on my knees. My shoulders were tight, but I kept my breathing slow. I'd learned that panic doesn't help. It just makes other people nervous. "Officer," I said, "what's your name?" He hesitated, then answered like it was normal. "Mendoza, Daniel Mendoza." "Okay," I said. "Officer Mendoza, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I've never been arrested. I ran a business for 20 years. I've lived in Arizona my whole life. Whatever that flag is, it's old. It's not me." "I hear you," he said. "I'm just following procedure." I nodded once and let it sit. A minute passed, then another. The light above the parking spaces buzzed faintly. Somewhere far off, a semi rolled down the highway. The sound came and went like a wave. I stared at my boots and tried to place that date again. August 18th, 1988. I could see my uncle's face in pieces, not in one clear picture, more like flashes. Him standing on my parents' porch with a cardboard box. Him lifting the hood of his truck and telling me not to touch anything. Him laughing once, quick, like he didn't want it to last. He'd been the quiet one in the family. The one who showed up, fixed what needed fixing, then left before anyone could ask questions. When he died, it was labeled an accident. One vehicle, late night, straight road, a tree. Nobody argued. Nobody asked for more. Back then, You didn't press too hard. People told you to be grateful you weren't the one in the ditch. Officer Mendoza walked to his cruiser and spoke into his radio again. I couldn't hear the words, but I watched his jaw tighten as he listened. Then he came back and stood near the front of my truck, not blocking me, just holding the line. "You have somewhere you need to be?" he asked. I let out a small breath that almost turned into a laugh. "Yeah," I said. "A warm bed, a shower, a kitchen with food in it, but I don't have those right now." He didn't react to that, just nodded once, like he'd heard it before. I looked out across the lot. The grocery store was closed, lights mostly off inside. A cart corral rattled in the wind. "How long until they get here?" I asked. "They said a unit is already en route," he replied. "Not local." I didn't ask what that meant. I already understood. Not local meant serious. I watched the entrance again. That's when my phone buzzed. It was almost dead. 10%, maybe less. I pulled it out, screen dim, and saw a missed call from my son. I didn't call him back. Not yet. I put the phone face down on the concrete beside me. Officer Mendoza shifted his weight. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, "just trying to understand why my name would be attached to anything federal." He looked at me for a second, then back at the lot entrance. "I don't get it either," he said. "That's why I called it in." 20 minutes after the first knock on my window, a black SUV rolled into the lot without sirens. No rush, no flash, just smooth movement and quiet confidence. It parked a few spaces away from the cruiser. A woman got out. Dark coat, hair pulled back. Not trying to look intimidating, but not trying to look friendly either. She walked toward us with a badge already in her hand. "Mr. Walker?" she asked. Even though she said it like a question, it wasn't one. I stood up slowly, joints stiff, and gave a small nod. "Yes." She looked me over in one quick sweep, the way people do when they're checking facts against a file. "My name is Agent Harper Keene," she said. "Department of Homeland Security." Officer Mendoza straightened slightly. Agent Keene didn't acknowledge him right away. Her attention stayed on me. "We've been trying to locate you for a long time," she said. "Your uncle left something behind before he died, something we never recovered." I didn't answer. I didn't argue. I just waited for the next sentence. She pulled a thin tablet from her bag and tapped through a few screens. Then she turned it toward me. A photo came up. An old image, slightly grainy. My Uncle Daniel, younger than I ever remembered him, wearing a uniform. 2 other men stood near him, faces half turned away. And in the background, near the edge of the frame, was a man I recognized immediately. Not my uncle. Not anyone from my family. My former father-in-law. A younger version of him, but the same posture, the same watchful look. Agent Keene watched my face as the recognition landed. Then she said very calmly, "Your uncle didn't die in an accident, Mr. Walker." I felt my mouth go dry. She continued, "And the reason you're sleeping in a parking lot isn't bad luck. It's connected." The wind pushed a plastic bag across the asphalt between us. It made a small scraping sound as it moved. Agent Keene lowered the tablet and said, "If you're willing, we need to talk somewhere warmer. And we need to do it before someone else finds you first." I didn't ask her who someone else was. I already knew the answer would change what I thought my life had been. I just nodded once. "Okay," I said. "Tell me what you need." Agent Keene didn't touch my arm or rush me. She just stepped slightly to the side, giving me space to make the choice feel like it was mine. Officer Mendoza looked relieved and uneasy at the same time, like he'd just handed off something he didn't want to carry. "You did the right thing," Agent Keene told him. Simple, professional. Then she turned back to me. "Do you have anything you need from the truck?" I looked at my pickup like it was a small apartment. Everything I owned that mattered was within reach of the driver's seat. "My bag," I said, "and my phone charger." "Get it," she replied. Slowly. I walked to the passenger door, opened it, and grabbed a worn duffel from the floorboard. Inside were a couple of changes of clothes, a folder with paperwork, a small shaving kit, and a zip pouch with receipts and bank letters I couldn't throw away. even though they felt like proof of a failure no one wanted to hear about. The charger was in the center console. I took it too. When I turned back, Agent Keene had opened the rear door of the SUV. The inside smelled like clean fabric and faint coffee. Not fresh coffee, more like coffee that lived in the vehicle, like it belonged to long nights. I slid in. She sat across from me, not beside me, not a friendly posture, a working posture. Officer Mendoza stayed near his cruiser, still watching, still present, but the scene was no longer his. Agent Keene spoke first. "Before we talk about your uncle, I need to confirm basics." I nodded. She said, "Name." "Ethan Walker." "Date of birth." I gave it. She tapped it in. "Place of birth." "Prescott." More tapping. Then she looked up. "Do you know why there would be a federal flag connected to you?" "No," I said. I didn't even know federal flags were a thing regular people could have. She gave a small exhale, not amused, just acknowledging the reality of it. "Most people don't." She turned the tablet toward me again, but this time it wasn't a photo. It was a scanned document with blocks of black redaction, old formatting, old typeface, the kind of paper that had been copied too many times. At the top was a date, August 1988, below it my uncle's name, and a line that made my stomach tighten. Next of kin identifier, Ethan Walker. "You were listed," she said. "Not your father, not your mother, you." I stared at the screen and felt the edges of the night sharpen. "My uncle barely spoke to me," I said. "He was around, but he wasn't close." Agent Keene kept her voice even. "People who do that kind of work don't always get to be close, especially if they're trying to keep a distance for safety." I looked at her. "What kind of work?" She didn't answer directly. "Not yet." Instead, she said, "Tell me about the last year. Why are you sleeping in your truck?" I swallowed once. I didn't want to talk about it, not because I was ashamed exactly, more because I was tired of explaining it to people who couldn't do anything, but she wasn't asking out of sympathy, she was building a timeline, so I gave it to her cleanly. 6 months ago, I said, I had a contracting business, small commercial maintenance, grounds work, irrigation. I wasn't rich, but I was steady. I had 8 guys on payroll, sometimes 10 in summer. We had contracts with medical offices, shopping centers, a few HOAs. She watched my face, not reacting. I continued. My marriage ended. My credit line got frozen. My biggest contracts dropped me within the same month. A bank I'd used for over a decade suddenly treated me like I was a risk. Then my truck payment got called in early because my business account went negative for 3 days. After that, everything moved fast. "Which bank?" she asked. "Sonoran Canyon Financial." Her eyes shifted for a fraction of a second. Small, but it was something. "And your ex-wife's family," she said. "What's their name?" I didn't hesitate. "The Pruitts." She nodded slowly, like that matched something in her head. "Gordon Pruitt," I added. "My former father-in-law." Agent Keene set the tablet down in her lap. "When did Gordon Pruitt first learn your uncle's name?" The question landed with weight. I looked out the window for a second. The lot was still empty, the light still buzzing overhead. Officer Mendoza still standing near his cruiser, hands resting near his belt like he was holding the night together. I thought back. It wasn't a big moment. That's what bothered me. It was ordinary. A family dinner, years ago, early in my marriage. Someone had mentioned the old truck my uncle left me, the one I'd used to start my business before I upgraded. Gordon's father had still been alive then. A frail old man with a thin voice and sharp eyes. I could see it clearly now, the way he'd stopped chewing mid-bite. "Daniel Walker?" he'd asked, too fast. I'd nodded, thinking it was just small talk. The old man had gone pale and leaned toward his son, whispered something. Gordon's face had changed, not angry, not disgusted, something else, like calculation. "About 20 years ago," I said to Agent Keene. She nodded once. That's consistent. Consistent with what? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed evidence sleeve, the kind you see in court. Clear plastic, white label area, barcode. Inside was a photo, printed on real paper, not a screen. She slid it out carefully and held it so I could see. My uncle, again, uniform, same group of men, but this photo was different, higher quality, closer, and in the corner in the background, there was no doubt, a younger Gordon Pruitt. Not a coincidence, not a similar-looking man. Him. Your uncle's work brought him into contact with people connected to financial institutions, she said. Some of those connections were never made public, some were buried. I felt my throat tighten. So what does this have to do with me now? Agent Keen's eyes stayed steady. Because the pattern in the last year of your life, she said, looks like someone applied pressure in a very specific way. Bank access, contract cancellations, legal leverage in family court. It's not random. She leaned forward slightly. That kind of coordinated damage usually happens for two reasons. Either you're being punished, or someone thinks you have something they need. I didn't speak. I let that sit. Then she said, "Do you have any of your business documents with you?" I blinked. What kind? Termination letters, bank notices, account freezes, anything with dates. I opened my duffel and pulled out the folder I kept wrapped in a rubber band. It was thick, bent at the corners, the kind of folder a man carries when he's trying to prove he didn't just collapse on his own. I handed it to her. She didn't skim. She organized. She laid the papers on her lap and started sorting them by date like she'd done it 1,000 times. First letter, second letter, bank notice, credit review, contract cancellation, another cancellation. She didn't need long. After a minute, she looked up. "Here," she said, tapping one sheet. "This is where it starts." "What?" I asked. She pointed to a line near the bottom of the page, a reference number, a department code. Then she tapped another paper. Same code format, different letterhead, a third, same. "These are different organizations," she said, "but they're using the same internal routing structure. That usually means one thing." I waited. She said, "They're all being pushed through the same influence channel." My stomach turned, not with fear exactly, but with the quiet realization that my life hadn't fallen apart like a bad season. It had been handled. Agent Keen gathered my papers back into a neat stack and slid them into her own folder like they belonged there now. Then she said, "We're going to do this in order." Her voice stayed calm, but it had a new firmness, like she'd moved from curiosity to procedure. "Step 1, she said, "we confirm what your uncle left behind and where it could be. Step 2, we document what was done to you this year, with dates and names, and we attach it to an active investigation. Step 3, she said, "we make sure you stop being easy to reach." I stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, "you don't sleep in parking lots anymore. Not tonight." Outside, the black SUV's engine stayed running. A low, steady hum. Agent Keen looked past me for a moment toward the entrance of the lot. Then she turned back and said, "Your uncle stored items somewhere your family controlled after his death. Do you still have access to your father's house?" "Yes," I said. "He's in Phoenix." "Good," she replied. "That's where we're going." I hesitated. What am I walking into? She held my eyes and answered without softness and without threat. "The truth," she said, "but we're going to find it on paper first." Then she added, almost like an afterthought, "And Mr. Walker, don't call anyone yet. Not your kids, not your ex-wife, not your old friends. Just wait." I nodded once. I didn't like it, but I understood it. Then I sat back, and we pulled out of the lot, leaving Officer Mendoza under the parking lights as if none of this had ever happened. And for the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope, more like structure. Like the night had rules again. We drove south in silence. The highway was empty in that late-night way, where the lines on the road feel like they're floating under your headlights. Agent Keen drove without rushing. No sudden lane changes, no phone calls on speaker. just steady hands on the wheel and long stretches of quiet. I watched the dashboard clock change minute by minute. My phone stayed face down in my lap. I didn't touch it. After about 40 minutes, she broke the silence. "Tell me about your uncle's truck," she said. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. It was an old Chevy, beige, bench seat, smelled like oil and peppermint gum. He left it to me when he died. I used it to start working jobs. Eventually, I sold it when I got my first newer work truck. "Who did you sell it to?" she asked. I thought for a second. "A guy named Lenny, from Chino Valley, paid cash." "Do you remember the year?" "Late 90s, I said. "Maybe 1999. She nodded, filing it away. Then she asked, "Did your uncle leave anything else? A box, a key, a letter?" I shook my head. Just the truck, and a folded note that said, "Use it to build something real." That's it. She didn't react like that was sentimental. She reacted like it was a clue. "Your father," she said. "Did he keep your uncle's things?" "He kept everything," I answered. "He doesn't throw away nails. If my uncle left a paperclip in a drawer, my dad probably still has it." That earned a small half-smile from her, the first one I'd seen. "Good," she said quietly. We reached Phoenix as the sky started turning from black to a dull, early gray. The city looked tired, lights still on in some windows, most of them dark. My dad lived in a one-story house in a quiet neighborhood that never really changed. Same fences, same gravel yards, same porch lights that stayed yellow instead of LED white. Agent Keene parked down the street, not in the driveway. "We don't announce ourselves," she said. "Not yet." I nodded. That made sense. My father opened the door after the second knock. He didn't look surprised to see me, which told me something. He'd been expecting trouble for years, even if he didn't say it out loud. His eyes went from me to Agent Keene. "Morning," she said. "Mr. Walker?" My dad didn't answer right away. He looked at her badge, then at my face. "What did you do?" he asked me, plain and quiet. "Nothing," I said. "That's the problem." Agent Keene kept it simple. "We're here about Daniel Walker." My father's expression tightened. Not fear exactly. More like he'd just heard an old sound he didn't want to recognize. He stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in." The house smelled like coffee and clean laundry. The kind of smell that comes from routine and an older man living alone but still taking care of himself. We sat at the kitchen table. My dad poured coffee into 3 mismatched mugs without asking. He slid one toward Agent Keene. She didn't drink it yet. She just wrapped her hands around it for warmth. Agent Keene spoke carefully. "Your brother was involved in a classified financial investigation in the 1980s. We have reason to believe he stored evidence before his death." My dad stared at the mug in front of him. "He said they were watching him," he replied. "I thought he was stressed. I thought he was seeing ghosts." Agent Keene nodded once. "He wasn't." My father looked at me then. He didn't say anything. He just looked at my face like he was checking that I was still standing. "He left you things," I said. "Didn't he?" My dad swallowed. "In the garage," he answered. "In storage. I didn't go through it. Felt wrong." Agent Keene set her mug down. "Can you show us?" My dad stood up and led us through the hallway, past the living room where the furniture was covered in that thin layer of stillness you see in houses where people don't entertain anymore. The garage door creaked when he lifted it. The air inside was cooler. It smelled like dust and motor oil and cardboard that had soaked up decades of seasons. Boxes were stacked neatly along the wall, labeled in my dad's handwriting. Daniel Army Tools papers. Agent Keene didn't start tearing through anything. She watched my dad's hands as he moved boxes aside. "He kept saying," my dad murmured, "if anything happens, don't let anyone else touch it, not even family." He looked at me. I didn't understand. Agent Keene crouched near a metal locker pushed into the corner, army green, dented, locked with a simple padlock. "Do you have the key?" she asked. My dad hesitated, then walked to a workbench drawer and pulled out a small ring of old keys. He tried 3 before one turned. The lock popped open with a dull click. Inside the locker were folded uniforms, a pair of boots, a stack of photos, and a hard plastic case that looked like it belonged to a tool set. Agent Keene reached in and removed the case first. She set it on the concrete and opened it carefully. Inside wasn't a tool. It was a microfiche sleeve, sealed in plastic, and a small leather journal wrapped in an old freezer bag, like someone had done it quickly, but with intention. Agent Keene didn't touch the journal with bare hands. She pulled on thin gloves from her pocket and lifted it like it mattered. My father let out a breath and sat down hard on a stool. "I knew it," he whispered. "I knew he was hiding something." Agent Keene held the microfiche sleeve up to the light coming through the garage window. The tiny frames caught the dawn in faint rectangles. "This is it," she said, not dramatic, just certain. She set it down and pulled a small portable reader from her SUV. Not big, not flashy, just something built for fieldwork. When she turned it on, the fan inside made a low whirring sound. We moved back into the kitchen with the reader and the sealed materials. The morning light was stronger now, washing the table in a pale glow. Agent Keene slid the microfiche into the reader. The first image came up: bank documents, old account numbers, transfer logs, names typed in block letters. Most of it meant nothing to me at first, just rows and columns. Then she moved to another frame. Photographs. Men in suits, shaking hands. Hotel conference rooms. A familiar face, younger but unmistakable. Gordon Pruitt. Agent Keene didn't look at me right away. She kept scrolling like she was confirming a sequence. Then she paused on one image and tapped the screen. In the corner, a date stamp, 1987. In the main frame, Gordon Pruitt standing beside a man Agent Keene identified in a quiet voice as a foreign intelligence officer. I sat back in the chair, coffee cold in my mug, and felt my chest go tight in a controlled, steady way. Not panic, recognition. Agent Keene pulled the leather journal closer and opened it carefully. The handwriting inside was my uncle's. I recognized it from old birthday cards, short entries, dates, notes that read like a man trying to keep himself calm while the world narrowed around him. She flipped to a page marked with a folded corner. Then she read silently for a moment. My dad leaned forward. "What does it say?" Agent Keene didn't read it out loud. She handed the open journal to me. I looked down. It was dated July 1988. It said in my uncle's plain handwriting that he had made copies, that he didn't trust the chain of command, that someone connected to a bank was trying to pressure his supervisors. Then one line stood out, underlined once. "If anything happens to me, Ethan will inherit more than the truck." I stared at that sentence until it stopped feeling like words and started feeling like a weight that had been sitting in my life without me knowing it. Agent Keene took the journal back and closed it. "This is enough to open this fully," she said, "but we need to be smart." I looked at her. "What now?" She nodded like she'd been waiting for that. "Now we shift from emotion to order," she said, "and we do it in steps." She pulled out her phone and started listing them like procedures she'd followed before. Step 1. We secure these materials. They do not stay in this house. Step 2. We build a timeline linking these documents to your recent financial sabotage. Step 3. We move on the Pruitts before they can clean up anything else. My father's face had gone pale. "They'll come here," he said. "They might try," Agent Keene replied, "which is why we don't wait." She looked at me. "You told me you confronted Gordon once." I nodded. "Outside his club, months ago." "What did he say?" she asked. I thought back. The way Gordon had looked at me like I was something on his shoe. "He told me to stay in my place," I said, like I belonged where he put me. Agent Keene's expression didn't change. "That's not just arrogance," she said. "That's fear dressed up as entitlement." She reached into her bag and pulled out a plain folder. No seal on the front, just a barcode label on the corner. She opened it and slid one page toward me. It was a warrant request draft, not signed yet, not final, but the names were there. Gordon Pruitt, Travis Pruitt, Sonoran Canyon Financial, several associated entities. I stared at the page. Agent Keene spoke quietly. I'm not promising a movie ending, she said. This will be paperwork and long days and court rules. But the evidence is real and the pattern is clear. Then she added, we're going to give the truth a straight path. That's all we can do. My dad sat with his hands folded, eyes fixed on the table like he was praying without saying it. I looked at the warrant request again and felt something settle in me. I'd spent months feeling like everything was slipping. Now, for the first time, I could see the shape of the machine that had done it. And if it was a machine, it could be documented. Agent Keen's phone buzzed. She checked it once, then stood up. We move today, she said. In 4 hours. I asked, where do I go? She looked at me like the answer was obvious. With me, she said. Then she turned to my father. Pack a small bag. You're not staying alone tonight. My dad blinked. Me? Agent Keen nodded. You're part of the chain. That makes you relevant. He didn't argue. He just stood up slowly, like a man accepting that an old worry had finally caught up. Agent Keen gathered the journal and the microfiche, sealed them back into protective sleeves, and placed them in her bag. Then she looked at me and said, do you have a list of every contract you lost? With dates? I did. It was in my folder, written by hand like a man trying to hold on to facts when everything else felt slippery. I pulled it out and handed it to her. She read it once, fast. Then she said, good. This is how we make consequences feel inevitable. And for the first time that morning I believed her. We didn't celebrate. We didn't talk about revenge. We just moved quietly, like people who finally had the right paperwork in their hands. By the time the sun cleared the rooftops, we were already loading my dad's old sedan with a small suitcase and locking the house behind us. Then we drove, and I watched the neighborhood shrink in the rearview mirror. I didn't know what Gordon Pruitt was doing at that exact moment, but I knew the clock had started, and I knew we were no longer waiting. By late morning, we were in a federal building downtown, not the kind with marble and ceremony, just fluorescent lights, beige walls, and a security desk that treated everyone the same. Agent Keen walked me through a side entrance and into a small conference room. There was a pitcher of water, a stack of forms, and a clock that ticked louder than it needed to. She set my folder down next to her own, then pulled out the microfiche printouts they had already started converting into readable pages. I hadn't known it could happen that fast, but I was learning that when the right people decided to move, they moved. She looked at me and said, this part is going to feel slow, even though it isn't. I nodded. Your job, she continued, is to stay steady and stick to what you know. Dates, names, documents. You don't argue. You don't persuade. You just confirm. I didn't ask why. I understood. A man in a suit came in, introduced himself as an assistant U.S. attorney, then sat down and started asking questions like he was building a wall one brick at a time. When did your line of credit freeze? I told him. Who notified you? I told him. Do you have the letter? I slid it across the table. What was the reference number? He wrote it down. What contract did you lose first? I named it, gave the date, gave the person. He didn't react. He just kept going. It wasn't emotional, it was methodical. After an hour, the assistant U.S. attorney left and 2 agents came in with laptops. They asked me to confirm small details that felt meaningless until I saw them match up with other records on their screens. A routing code, a department abbreviation, a contact email domain that appeared in more than one place. At one point, one of the agents turned his laptop so I could see. 3 different organizations, 3 different letters. Same internal review unit label, same escalation chain. It was the first time I saw my personal collapse as something structured. Agent Keen watched me take it in, then said quietly, "You're doing fine." I didn't answer. I just nodded once. Around early afternoon, she got a message on her phone. She read it, stood up, and closed her folder. "Okay," she said. "We're ready for the next step." "What is it?" I asked. She didn't soften it. "We're going to speak to Gordon Pruitt." The room went still inside me. Not fear exactly, more like a tightness at the base of my throat. "I thought you were going to raid him," I said. "We are," she replied. "But before we do anything public, we give him a chance to confirm identity and procedure in a controlled setting. He's a man who hides behind decorum, so we use decorum. I let that sit. Then I asked, where? His office, she said. Conference room, recorded, witnessed, clean. I looked down at my hands. Dirt still lived in the lines of my skin no matter how often I washed. It always had. I'd stopped seeing it as something to hide. Do I have to be there? I asked. Agent Keen's answer was simple. It helps if you are. Your presence changes what he can pretend. We drove to Scottsdale in an unmarked vehicle, not the SUV this time, a plain sedan that blended into traffic. The agents in the front wore simple jackets, no tactical gear, nothing that would draw eyes. Agent Keen sat beside me in the back. Calm posture, phone in hand, no unnecessary words. The building was exactly what I expected. Glass, polished stone, a lobby that smelled faintly like citrus cleaner and expensive air freshener. I hadn't been in places like that for months. Not since the last time I stood outside Gordon's club, looking up at the entrance like it was a gate to a world I wasn't allowed to enter. This time, I walked through the front door. A receptionist looked up, smiled, then froze slightly when she saw the small group with me. People know when something official walks in, even when it's quiet. Agent Keen approached the desk. Harper Keen, she said. We're here for Gordon Pruitt. We have an appointment. The receptionist opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes flicked to the badge. She swallowed and picked up the phone. A minute later, an elevator opened and a man stepped out in a suit. Not Gordon. Younger, assistant type. He smiled too wide and too fast. Can I help you? He asked. Agent Keen held up a folder. We're here for Mr. Pruitt. Conference room, now. The man's smile tightened. Mr. Pruitt is in a meeting. Agent Keen didn't argue. She just repeated, now. The man's eyes moved to me, then back to her. He seemed to register me as a detail he didn't like. He led us down a hallway with framed awards and photographs. I recognized Gordon's face in a few of them. Charity dinners, golf tournaments, poses with people who smiled like they'd never known a cold night in their life. We reached a conference room with a long table and a wall of windows. The blinds were half open, letting in bright afternoon light. Gordon Pruitt was already inside, standing near the window with his back to us. He didn't turn right away. He let the silence stretch, like he controlled it. Then he turned slowly and looked straight at me. His face didn't show surprise, not the kind a normal person would show. It showed recognition, and something underneath it that he tried to hide. I wondered when you'd stop crawling, he said. No raised voice, no anger, just that smooth contempt he always carried, like it was a family heirloom. I didn't respond. Agent Keen stepped in front of me slightly, not shielding me, just setting the shape of the room. Mr. Pruitt, she said, this is an official interview. It is being recorded. Gordon glanced at the agents, then at her badge. He smiled faintly. Homeland Security, he said. That's dramatic. Agent Keen didn't react. Please sit. Gordon didn't sit. He walked to the head of the table and rested his hands on the back of the chair like he owned the furniture. Am I under arrest? He asked. Not at this moment, Agent Keen replied. We're here to confirm facts. Gordon's eyes flicked to me again. You, he said, like the word tasted bad. I told my daughter you'd ruin her life. I kept my voice calm. You didn't tell her that, Gordon. You trained her to believe it. His smile thinned. He didn't like that I spoke without heat. Agent Keen opened her folder and laid out 3 documents on the table, clean copies, labeled, tabbed. She pushed the first one toward him. This is a photo from 1987 showing you in contact with a foreign intelligence asset. Gordon didn't look at it. He looked at her. Agent Keen pushed the second. This is a transfer log routed through a bank system tied to your family's legacy accounts. Third, this is a set of internal routing codes matching the financial actions taken against Mr. Walker over the last year. Gordon finally glanced down. Just a quick look. Then his eyes came back up. You can't prove anything from that. Agent Keen nodded once, like she'd expected the sentence. She said, We don't need you to confess. We need you to confirm your identity and your connection to these institutions. You can do that, or you can refuse. Either way, the record is made. Gordon's gaze shifted again to me, and this time his expression changed slightly. Not anger, not disdain, concern, not for me, for what I might know. "You think you found something," he said softly. "You think your uncle left you a treasure map." I met his eyes and kept my tone level. "He left a record. That's different." Gordon's jaw tightened. "Where is it?" I didn't answer. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's the only responsible thing to do. Agent Keene asked, "Do you acknowledge that you met with Dmitry Volkov in 1987? Gordon laughed once, short and controlled. "I meet a lot of people." Agent Keene didn't move. "Do you acknowledge your father maintained accounts used to route international transfers outside standard compliance review?" Gordon's face stayed smooth, but his fingers flexed against the chair. He didn't answer. Agent Keene looked down at her notes and said, "Noted. Refusal." Gordon leaned forward slightly, eyes still on me. "You're not built for this," he said quietly. "You never were." I let a small pause pass before I replied. "I built a business," I said. "I paid people on time. I raised 2 kids who still call me dad. I slept in a truck and didn't quit. I don't think you get to decide what I'm built for." For the first time, Gordon looked unsettled. Not because of my words as a speech, but because they were plain and didn't give him anything to twist. Agent Keene closed the folder, stood up, and said, "This interview is concluded." Gordon straightened fast. "That's it?" Agent Keene met his eyes. "That's it." We turned to leave, and as we did, Gordon's voice followed me, lower now, almost urgent. "Ethan," he said. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. He tried again. "If you hand it over, you can still have a life." I stayed still for a moment, listening to the hum of the building, the distant sound of someone typing in an office down the hall. Then I turned just enough to look at him. "I'm already building one," I said. "Without you in it." Agent Keene opened the door and we walked out into the hallway. No shouting, no scene. Just a clean exit and the quiet knowledge that Gordon had finally shown his real concern. Not reputation, not family. Evidence. As we reached the elevator, Agent Keene's phone buzzed again. She read the message and looked at me. "Good timing," she said. "The warrants just got signed." The elevator doors opened. We stepped inside, and as the doors slid shut, I could still feel Gordon's eyes on the back of my neck like a hand trying to pull something from me. Then the elevator started down, and I waited for whatever came next. We didn't go back into the building. Agent Keene led us through a side corridor, out a quiet exit, and into a parking structure where 2 unmarked vehicles were already waiting. The air in the garage was cooler, and it smelled like concrete dust and old exhaust. She spoke in short phrases now, like everything had a place. "Phone's off," she said. One of the agents handed me a small pouch. I powered my phone down and slipped it in. Agent Keene did the same with hers. It wasn't paranoia. It was process. We drove a few blocks and stopped near a low office park with no signage that meant anything to the public. Inside, there was another conference room, another clock, and a wall-mounted monitor showing a live map view with pins and timestamps. Agent Keene pointed to the chairs. "Sit, watch. You'll understand more if you see how it actually happens." A supervisor came in, older, gray hair, calm face. He nodded at Agent Keene. "Harper," he said. Then he looked at me. "Mr. Walker." He didn't ask me how I was. He didn't offer comfort. He treated me like a fact that belonged in the file, and strangely, that made me feel safer. Agent Keene opened a binder and slid a single sheet toward him. We confirmed his connection and elicited an evidence-seeking statement. The supervisor skimmed it once. "Good." Then he nodded at the monitor. "We're moving." On the screen, 3 locations were highlighted. Gordon Pruitt's office, a house in Paradise Valley, a secondary residence listed under an LLC with a bland name. Another pin was Sonoran Canyon Financial Headquarters. The timing showed synchronized entry points, no flashing icons, no unnecessary theatrics, just movement. Agent Keene leaned slightly toward me. "This part won't feel satisfying," she said. "It will feel quiet, but it's the real part." I watched the monitor as the first team arrived at Gordon's office building. There was a timestamp and a small camera feed in the corner, a hallway, a door, a hand holding paperwork. Then someone opened the door. People stepped in. That was it. No yelling, no running. Just adults entering rooms with legal authority. My hands were folded in front of me. I kept them there. The next feed showed a gate opening at the Paradise Valley property, a wide driveway, desert landscaping lit by soft ground lights, a clean front door. A team approached, knocked once, then again. The door opened. A man in a robe appeared. Gordon. Even on a grainy feed, I could see his posture change. He spoke quickly. He tried to control it with words. It didn't work. An agent handed him paperwork. He looked down. Then he looked up and started talking again, faster now. Agent Keene didn't comment. She just watched. On the bank feed, another team entered the compliance office. Cubicles, keycard doors, a records room. An agent walked to a cabinet and placed a sealed evidence tag on it. Another agent started photographing the front of a server rack. Everything became numbers and labels. That was the first time I understood how the system beats people like Gordon. Not with drama, with documentation. After about 40 minutes, the supervisor nodded toward Agent Keene. "We have enough to bring him in." Agent Keene left the room for a minute and returned with my phone pouch. "Power it up," she said. "You're going to get calls." I hesitated, then did it. The phone lit up. Notifications stacked immediately. Missed calls, voicemails, a text from my daughter, a text from my son, then a number I recognized. My ex-wife. I didn't answer yet. I just let the phone sit on the table. Agent Keene said, "You'll talk to them, but not before we finish the timeline." She placed a printed set of pages in front of me. Not the microfiche frames. These were converted, clean, with readable headings, transaction logs, internal memos, a chain of emails. She tapped one specific page. "Look at the date." I did. It was a month before my credit line froze. The email was between a bank compliance manager and a third-party consultant. The subject line was bland, something like risk review protocol, but the body of the email contained a phrase that felt like a hand around my throat. Subject, Walker, Ethan. Recommend tightening access and slowing outbound approvals. Agent Keene tapped the bottom of the page. "Now look at who the consultant is." I read the name twice to make sure my eyes weren't lying. A firm owned by Travis Pruitt. I sat back slightly, not collapsing, just adjusting to the weight of it. "So, they planned it," I said. "Yes," she replied. "And they left enough traces that we can prove it." She slid another sheet forward. A contract cancellation email from one of my biggest clients, forwarded internally with a note. "Per Gordon's request, switch vendors by end of month." There it was, in plain text. Not rumor, not assumption. The kind of evidence that doesn't care about anyone's opinion. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked at the screen. "My son," I answered. "Austin," I said, keeping my voice calm. His voice came fast, scared. "Dad, what's happening?" "Agents are at Grandpa Gordon's house. Mom's crying. Everyone's saying Russian money and bank crimes and that your name is involved." I took a breath and spoke slowly. "I'm not in trouble," I said. "I'm involved because someone finally opened the right file." "Dad," he said. "What file?" I looked at Agent Keene. She gave a small nod. "Your great-uncle Daniel," I said. "He didn't die the way we were told. He left evidence behind, and it connects to Gordon. The government has it now." Austin went quiet for a beat. Then his voice softened. "So, you weren't crazy. You weren't just falling apart." I didn't like how that sounded, but I understood why he said it. "No," I said. "I was targeted. And now there's proof." "I'm coming," he said immediately. "Where are you?" "Not yet," I replied. "Stay with your sister. Keep your phone on. I'll call you back when I can tell you where to go." He tried to argue. I didn't let it stretch. "Austin," I said, Listen to me. Step 1. You stay where you are. Step 2. You don't talk to anyone about this outside family. Step 3. You wait for my call. He exhaled. Okay. Okay. I'm listening. Good, I said. I'll call you soon. I ended the call and set the phone back down. Agent Keene watched me quietly. Then my phone buzzed again. Renessa. I hadn't heard her voice in months. I answered. Ethan, she said, and her voice was breaking. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. My dad said you were unstable. He said you were reckless. He said you were going to ruin us. I kept my tone steady. Where are you right now? At home, she said. They're here, Ethan. They're going through things. Mom is... She's sitting on the stairs. She looks like she's going to faint. I didn't respond to the emotion. I responded to the facts. Are Austin and Bree okay? I asked. Yes, she said. They're with Austin's friend. They're safe. Good, I replied. Then you stay inside. You don't leave the property unless they tell you to. And you don't sign anything you don't understand. If someone gives you paperwork, ask for a copy. She sobbed quietly. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I paused. Not to punish her with silence, just to choose what mattered. I believe you didn't understand the full picture, I said. But you made choices. We'll talk about that later. She whispered, Is Dad going to prison? I don't know, I said honestly. That depends on what the documents show and what the court decides. Then I added, I have to go. I ended the call. I put the phone face down. Agent Keene slid a final packet toward me. This, she said, is the restitution pathway. It won't be automatic, but it's real. I looked down. There were figures, asset freezes, seizure amounts, a projected restitution estimate tied to documented harm. It wasn't a fantasy number. It was tied to contracts, credit actions, and provable interference. Agent Keene pointed to a line. Your losses are traceable. Payroll disruption, contract breach damages, legal manipulation. We can attach it all. The supervisor came back into the room and nodded once at Agent Keene. We have him in custody, he said. No incident. He's talking. Agent Keene didn't smile. She just acknowledged it with a small nod. Good, she said. Then she turned to me. You're going to be offered options, she said. Protective housing, relocation, temporary assistance, legal support. It won't feel like winning. It will feel like paperwork, but it will give you stability. I stared at the documents in front of me and felt something unfamiliar. Not triumph, relief. The kind that comes when you can finally stop guessing. Over the next 2 weeks, everything happened the way systems happen. First, I was placed in temporary housing through a federal assistance arrangement tied to the investigation. It wasn't glamorous. A small furnished apartment with neutral walls and a kitchen stocked with basics. But it had a bed, a locked door, a shower that didn't require a gym membership. Then, the bank received federal oversight, and my frozen line of credit became part of a formal inquiry. My business accounts were reviewed not as a failure, but as a case. My former contracts were contacted. Some acted surprised, some acted guilty. A few tried to say they were just following recommendations. That didn't matter anymore. The emails existed. Gordon Pruitt was charged with financial crimes connected to a laundering network that had shifted hands over decades. The original roots went back to the late Cold War era, and the modern pieces ran through shell companies and real estate development. Travis Pruitt was charged as well, not for family loyalty, but for acting as a facilitator using his consulting and property entities. Sonoran Canyon, financial faced fines and executive indictments tied to compliance failures and deliberate routing. None of it felt dramatic. It felt like watching a dam break in slow motion. I attended one hearing, not in the audience like a spectator, but in a side room where I could watch on a monitor. Gordon sat at a table in a suit that suddenly looked like a costume instead of armor. When his attorney spoke, Gordon kept glancing toward the back of the room like he expected someone to rescue him. No one did. After the hearing, Agent Keene met me in a hallway and handed me a single-page summary. This is where we are, she said. I scanned it. Numbers, dates, pending motions. Evidence status. Then I looked at her. So it's real, I said. It's real, she replied. A month later, the restitution decision came through in writing, not as an apology, as a calculation. A lump sum tied to recovered assets and documented harm, plus structured support for rebuilding. It wasn't enough to undo the marriage. It wasn't enough to give me back the months I'd spent sleeping in parking lots and watching my life shrink. But it was enough to stand back up without begging. I used part of it to reopen my business, but differently. I called Miguel, my old crew lead, and asked him to meet me for coffee. When he walked in, he looked cautious at first, like he expected a sales pitch or an apology. I didn't give him either. I slid a folder across the table. Inside was an offer. Equity, not just wages, a real share. He stared at it for a long time. Why? He finally asked. Because you kept your word, I said, and because I'm not rebuilding the same way. He nodded slowly, then signed. Over the next 6 months, we rehired a few more guys. Not all. Life had moved on for some of them. But enough came back that the work felt familiar again. The contracts returned too, one by one, not because people suddenly respected me, but because influence had shifted and the truth had consequences. My daughter met me for dinner one evening at a quiet restaurant near her apartment. She looked older than the last time I'd seen her, not in age, in experience. I'm sorry, she said softly, staring at her water glass. I believed things I shouldn't have. I didn't lecture her. I'm here now, I said. That's what matters. She nodded and blinked a few times like she was trying to keep control, the way I'd taught her without saying it. My son changed his major, not because he wanted revenge, but because he'd watched how quietly power can hurt people. I want to work in investigations, he told me. Not like a hero, just where the paperwork is. I understood that. As for Renessa, we didn't put the marriage back together. We spoke, carefully, with boundaries. She moved into a smaller place and rebuilt her own work without her father's network. Sometimes she'd text me about the kids. Sometimes we'd talk on the phone for 5 minutes and keep it clean. That was enough. One evening, months after the first knock on my window, I met Officer Mendoza at a sports bar near downtown Phoenix. He was off duty, wearing a simple hoodie, looking like someone who still couldn't fully believe he'd been the first domino. He raised his glass slightly. I almost didn't run your license, he admitted. Something told me to do it. I sat back and let the noise of the bar fill the space for a moment. Maybe it was instinct, I said. Maybe it was my uncle. Either way, you did your job. Mendoza nodded. I'm glad you're okay. I didn't say I was okay. I said something truer. I'm stable, I replied. Later that night, back in my small apartment, I made tea and cleaned the kitchen counters slowly, like it mattered. I lined up my mail in a neat stack, bills on one side, business documents on the other. I put the phone on the charger and watched the screen light up with a few calm messages, nothing urgent. Then I sat down on the edge of the couch and let the quiet settle. In the next room, my duffel bag was still there, folded and packed, not because I expected to run again, but because I'd learned that preparedness is its own kind of peace. And as I sat there, I thought about something Agent Keene said early on. Truth doesn't need drama, it just needs a straight path. I stayed still for a while. Then I waited. A year later, my life looked ordinary again. Not perfect, not untouched, just normal in a way I'd stopped expecting. Most mornings I woke up before sunrise out of habit. I'd make coffee and stand at the kitchen counter while the house stayed quiet. I kept my place simple, a small rental with clean floors, a basic couch, and a little table by the window where I could sort paperwork without spreading it everywhere. I didn't buy anything flashy. I didn't need to prove anything. The first thing I did every day was the same. I checked my calendar, then my bank balance, then my messages. It wasn't anxiety, it was structure. I'd learned the value of simple checks. Step 1, confirm the day. Step 2, confirm the numbers. Step 3, move forward without guessing. Green Valley Maintenance, the rebuilt version of my old business, ran quieter than before. We took fewer contracts at first, but we did them well, and we got paid on time. Miguel was part owner now. He ran crews the way I used to, with steady expectations and no excuses. We had rules that kept the work clean. No handshake deals without paperwork, no contracts without clear terms, no single client bigger than 20% of revenue, no relying on one bank for everything. It felt boring. That's what made it safe. My kids came around more often, not because they felt guilty, but because time had softened the edges enough for conversation. We didn't dig up every old argument. We didn't pretend it never happened. We just kept showing up in small ways that built trust back into place. My daughter would stop by with takeout and sit at the counter while I cooked something simple. She'd tell me about her classes, her work, her friends. Sometimes she'd pause and say, "I still can't believe he did all that." I'd nod, and I wouldn't add heat to it. "People do what they can get away with," I'd say, "until they can't." My son came by on weekends sometimes, and he'd help me with small repairs around the house. He liked working with his hands, even though he was in school for investigations now. One afternoon, while we were tightening a hinge on the back door, he said, "Dad, you know what I keep thinking about?" "What?" I asked. "That it wasn't a fight," he said. "It was a system, like a lever. He pulled the right levers." I tightened the last screw and wiped my hands on a rag. "That's why we don't build our lives on favors," I said. "We build them on records." He nodded like that was exactly what he needed to hear. Every few months, Agent Keene checked in. Not personal, not friendly in the usual way. Just a message confirming that court dates were moving, that filings were on track, that protective measures were still in place. Gordon Pruitt didn't get a dramatic ending. He got a legal one. Sentencing came after a long stretch of hearings and sealed motions. No speeches. No confessions that made anyone feel better. The judge read through the record, cited numbers, referenced timeline entries, and made it clear that the consequences were tied to documents, not to charm. Gordon's sentence was substantial. Travis received less, but lost everything that had made him feel untouchable. The bank paid fines and came under federal oversight. Executives resigned, some were charged, some quietly disappeared from the public story, which is often how it goes. And my uncle's evidence, the thing he'd been hiding since 1988, became part of the record that finally closed the loop, not because the world is fair, because he'd left proof. One evening, long after the headlines faded, I sat at my table and opened a plain envelope Agent Keene had delivered through proper channels. Inside was a single photocopy. A page from my uncle's journal. It wasn't new information, I'd read it before, but this time it came with an official note attached, confirming it had been authenticated and entered into the case file. I read the line again. "If anything happens to me, Ethan will inherit more than the truck." I set the page down and stared at it for a while. Then I put it in a folder labeled Daniel, and I filed it in a drawer where it belonged, not on the wall, not framed, not used as a symbol, just stored correctly. That night, I washed dishes slowly, wiped the counter, and set the coffee maker for morning. I took my time with everything, like I was teaching myself that I could live without rushing. Before bed, I walked outside and stood on the small back patio. The air was mild. The neighborhood was quiet. Somewhere, a dog barked once and stopped. I stood there and listened. For a long time, my life had been noise. Accusations, legal threats, financial warnings, people talking around me as if I wasn't in the room. Now it was mostly silence, and silence, when it's chosen, can feel like ownership. A few weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring twice, then answered. "This is Ethan." A man's voice, older, cautious. "Mr. Walker, I was told you might be willing to talk." "Who is this?" I asked. He paused. "My name is Mark. I used to work compliance at Sonoran Canyon." I didn't say anything. I waited. He continued. "I'm retired now. I'm not looking for trouble. But I've been losing sleep since the investigation. There was something else. Another case. A person who got crushed the same way you did." I leaned back in my chair and kept my voice even. "What's their name?" I asked. He said it. A name I didn't recognize. "A contractor?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "Small business, different city, same pattern." I didn't understand it at the time. I told myself it was normal risk review. But now, I think it was something else. I held the phone and felt the familiar shift inside me. Not excitement, not anger, responsibility. Send me what you have, I said. Only documents. Only what you can share legally, no guesses. Okay, he said quickly. Okay, I can do that. I gave him an email address Miguel and I used for formal business records. Then I ended the call. I put the phone face down. Then I sat there for a moment, letting the quiet settle again. Some people never get their file opened. Some people get buried under paperwork that was designed to look normal. And sometimes, all it takes is one person deciding to speak cleanly and bring the right documents into daylight. I didn't know what would come from that call, but I knew I would handle it the same way I handled my own. Step by step. Calmly. On paper first. Later that night, I made tea and sat by the window with the lights low. I watched a car pass down the street, headlights moving across the walls, then fading. My life wasn't a story about winning. It was a story about getting back to solid ground and staying there. If you stayed with me to the end, thank you. Tap like and subscribe if these calm, true stories are your kind of thing. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. 2 popular stories are going to appear next, and I'll meet you in the next one.